Every act of betrayal, theft, or violence has a pre-shape, a behavioral fingerprint that appears weeks or months before. Most people see it and explain it away. They tell themselves stories. Oh, he's just going through a rough patch. She's stressed. He didn't mean it like that. And then 6 months later, they're sitting in a police station or a lawyer's office or a hospital room, replaying everything in their head, and they realize the signs were there the entire time. They just didn't have the language for what they were seeing. I'm going to give you that language right now. I spent years training people to read behavioral leakage. That's the technical term. Behavioral leakage. It's what happens when someone's planning something harmful, something they know is wrong, and their brain can't fully contain it. It leaks out in micro behaviors, in conversational patterns, in the way they test your boundaries weeks before they ever cross them. And here's the thing. You've been taught your whole life to ignore these signals, to be polite, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to not be paranoid. I'm going to teach you to be a little paranoid in a useful way. By the end of this video, you're going to understand 3 mechanisms, 3 patterns that show up before someone harms you. Not during, not after, before. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. You'll start catching them in real time, in your workplace, in your relationships, in people you've just met. And you'll have a choice you didn't have before. The choice to step back before the damage happens. Let me ground this in something real. There's a reason this works. And it's not mystical. It's neurological. Your brain has a threat detection system that's millions of years old. It's called the amygdala, and it's wired to pick up on inconsistency. When someone says one thing but their body language says another, when their story doesn't quite line up, when they violate a small rule and watch to see if you react, your amygdala flags it. You feel a little twinge, a little discomfort. Most people have been trained to suppress that twinge, to rationalize it away. Profilers are trained to do the opposite. We're trained to notice the twinge, write it down, and wait for the pattern to repeat, because it always repeats. Harmful people don't just wake up one day and harm you out of nowhere. They build up to it. They rehearse it, consciously or unconsciously, and that rehearsal leaves a trail. I'm going to walk you through that trail right now. 3 stages. 3 patterns, and I'm going to show you exactly how they work. Number 1 is boundary testing. This is the foundation. Before someone harms you in a big way, they test whether they can harm you in a small way and get away with it. They're not doing this because they're evil masterminds. Most of the time, they're not even fully aware they're doing it. But their brain is running an algorithm. It's asking, how much can I take from this person? How far can I push before they push back? Here's what it looks like. Someone borrows something small and returns it late, or doesn't return it at all. They make a comment that's just slightly over the line, something that feels a little too personal, a little too cutting, and then they watch your face. If you laugh it off, if you say nothing, if you make an excuse for them, they've just learned something about you. They've learned that your boundaries are soft. Let me say that again. They've learned that your boundaries are soft, and then they escalate. The next boundary violation is a little bigger. They show up late and don't apologize. They ask for a favor that's inconvenient and frame it so that saying no makes you look selfish. They tell a small lie and see if you catch it. Each time, they're testing. Each time, they're gathering data. And if you keep allowing it, they now know the size of the space they can operate in. This is not about being rude or making mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has a bad day. Boundary testing is different. It's repetitive. It's watching your reaction. And here's the key detail. Most people miss boundary testers are calm when they violate your boundaries. They're not flustered. They're not apologetic in a real way. They might say sorry, but the tone is flat. The body language is relaxed because they're not sorry. They're studying you. I've seen this in interrogation settings. I've seen it in workplace harassment cases. I've seen it in domestic violence patterns. The first violation is always small, always deniable. And the victim almost always lets it go because it feels too small to make a fuss about. But that small violation is the most important moment in the entire relationship. It's the moment where the harmful person learns whether you will protect yourself or not. And that's the first pattern. Boundary testing, write it down. Watch for it. When someone crosses a line and then watches your face instead of apologizing, you're being tested. Number 2 is narrative prepositioning. This one is subtle as hell. And it's one of the most reliable predictors of harm I've ever encountered. Here's how it works. Before someone betrays you, lies to you, steals from you, or harms you, they plant a story, a narrative. They position themselves as the victim of something or someone else. And they do it weeks or months before they harm you, sometimes years. Why? Because they're pre-building their alibi. Not legally, emotionally. They're setting up a frame so that when they do harm you, you'll hesitate to call it out. You'll think, well, they've been through so much. You'll feel guilty for being angry. You'll second-guess your own perception. Let me give you a concrete example. Someone starts telling you early in the relationship about how their ex was crazy, how their last boss was unfair, how their family never understood them, how people always misinterpret their intentions. They frame themselves as perpetually misunderstood, perpetually wronged. And they tell these stories with just enough emotion that you feel sympathy. You think, this person has been hurt? I'm going to be different. I'm going to treat them well. But here's what's actually happening. They're installing a lens, a filter, so that when they lie to you, when they take from you, when they hurt you, your first thought won't be, this person is harmful. Your first thought will be, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe I'm like the ex, the boss, the family. I'll say that one more time. They're installing a filter so that when they harm you, you'll blame yourself first. This is relationship grooming. That's the term. And it doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It happens in workplaces. It happens in friendships. It happens in families. The person who's going to embezzle from the company spends months talking about how undervalued they are. The person who's going to spread rumors about you spends weeks talking about how people have spread rumors about them. The person who's going to cheat on you spends the early part of the relationship talking about how they've been cheated on and how devastating it was. Now, does this mean that everyone who's been wronged is dangerous? No, of course not. Real victims exist. Real pain exists. But here's the difference. People who have genuinely processed their trauma don't lead with it. They don't use it as a conversational tool in the first month of knowing you. They don't bring it up repeatedly, with the same emotional intensity, in a way that makes you feel responsible for healing them. Narrative prepositioning is strategic. It's often unconscious, but it's strategic. The person is building a psychological moat around themselves so that you can't hold them accountable later. And if you look back at the relationships where you were harmed, I'm willing to bet you'll find this pattern. They told you who they were. They told you they were the victim, and you believed them. And then when they harmed you, you hesitated to name it because you didn't want to be another person who misunderstood them. That's the second pattern. Narrative prepositioning. Watch for people who frame themselves as perpetual victims before you've seen any evidence of it. Watch for people who tell you how others have wronged them before they've earned your trust. That's not openness. That's setup. Number 3 is escalation grooming. This is where the boundary testing and the narrative prepositioning come together. Escalation grooming is the process by which someone slowly increases the severity of their behavior while simultaneously desensitizing you to it. They do it so gradually that you don't notice the baseline shifting. And by the time the harm is obvious, you're already deep in the pattern and it feels almost normal. Here's how it works. Let's say someone starts with a joke that's slightly mean. You don't laugh, but you don't call it out. A week later, they make another joke. Slightly meaner. You feel uncomfortable, but you stay quiet. A month later, they're openly mocking you in front of others. And you're sitting there wondering how it got to this point. It got to this point because each small escalation was just different enough from the last one that you couldn't pinpoint the moment it became unacceptable. This is the boiling frog principle. You've heard it. If you drop a frog in boiling water, it jumps out. If you put a frog in cool water and slowly heat it, the frog stays until it's cooked. That's escalation, grooming. The water temperature rises 1 degree at a time. I've seen this in financial fraud cases. The person who eventually steals $100,000 from their employer doesn't start there. They start by taking $20 from petty cash. Then $100, then they fudge a receipt. Then they skim a little off a client payment. Each step is small enough that if they get caught, they can say it was an accident, a misunderstanding. But they're not getting caught. They're learning what they can get away with, and they're training everyone around them to not notice. I've also seen this in abuse cases. Physical violence almost never starts with a punch. It starts with a raised voice, then a slammed door, then a hand on your arm, just a little too tight, then a shove that's framed as playful, then a grab, then a hit, and at every stage, the abuser watches to see if you stay. If you stay, the behavior escalates. If you stay, your nervous system starts to recalibrate. You start to think, maybe this is just how relationships are. Maybe I'm overreacting. You're not overreacting. Your amygdala is screaming at you, but you've been socially conditioned to ignore it. Escalation grooming works because human beings are adaptation machines. We adapt to almost anything if it happens slowly enough. And harmful people, whether they know it or not, exploit that. They turn up the heat 1 degree at a time. And by the time you realize you're in danger, you've already normalized a dozen things that should have been deal breakers on day 1. So here's the inoculation. Here's the countermeasure. When someone crosses a boundary, no matter how small, you name it immediately, out loud. You don't have to be harsh. You don't have to blow up the relationship. You just have to mark the line. You say, hey, that didn't land well. Or I'm not comfortable with that. Or that's not going to work for me. And then you watch what happens next. If the person apologizes sincerely, adjusts their behavior, and doesn't repeat the violation, they're probably safe. They made a mistake. They corrected it. But if they get defensive, if they minimize it, if they make you feel like you're being too sensitive, if they do it again a week later, you've just identified a threat, and you have information you didn't have before. That's the third pattern. Escalation, grooming, the slow boil, the incremental violation, the recalibration of your baseline so that unacceptable becomes normal. Now here's where this gets personal. This isn't just about other people. This is about you. Right now, because if you're listening to this and you're thinking about someone in your life, someone who's testing your boundaries, someone who positioned themselves as a victim early on, someone who's been slowly escalating and you've been explaining it away, you're at a choice point. You can keep explaining it away. You can keep giving them the benefit of the doubt. You can keep thinking it's going to get better. Or you can acknowledge what your nervous system has been trying to tell you for weeks or months. That something is off, that the pattern is there, that the pre-shape is visible. And here's the hard part, the part nobody wants to hear. If you stay in that relationship, if you stay in that job, if you keep engaging with that person after you've seen the pattern, you're not being kind. You're not being patient. You're teaching them that the pattern works. You're reinforcing the behavior and the harm that comes next. You'll have seen it coming. I'm not saying that to blame you. I'm saying it because you have more power than you think. The moment you see the pre-shape, the moment you recognize the leakage, you can act. You can step back. You can set a boundary. You can leave. And most of the time, that's enough. Most harmful people are opportunistic. They're not hunting you specifically. They're testing everyone. And they commit to the people who don't push back. If you push back early, they move on. They find someone else. And you've just saved yourself months or years of damage. Let me tell you what happens if you don't. If you ignore the boundary testing, if you absorb the narrative pre-positioning, if you allow the escalation grooming to continue, here's the predictable path. The harm escalates until it becomes undeniable. You finally speak up, and the person responds with shock, with hurt, with confusion. They say, "I had no idea you felt that way. Why didn't you tell me?" And you'll feel crazy because you did tell them, not in words, maybe, but in every wince, every hesitation, every time you pulled back. They knew, they always knew. They just knew you wouldn't enforce the boundary. So they kept pushing. That's the game. That's the pattern. And once you see it, you'll never not see it again. So here's what you do. You start paying attention to the small things, not in a paranoid way, not in a way that makes you suspicious of everyone, but in a way that honors your own nervous system. When someone crosses a line and you feel that little twinge, that little discomfort, don't rationalize it. Don't explain it away. Just note it. Write it down if you have to. And then watch to see if it happens again. If it happens again, you have a pattern. And patterns don't lie. People lie. Patterns don't. The second thing you do is you stop rewarding boundary violations with your presence. If someone tests a boundary and you stay, you've just told them the boundary doesn't exist. So the next time someone violates a small boundary, a little boundary, you mark it. You name it. And if they don't correct it, you reduce your investment in that relationship. You pull back. You create distance. You don't have to make a scene. You don't have to announce it. You just stop being available. And the third thing you do is you listen when people tell you who they are. If someone spends the first month of knowing you talking about how everyone in their life has wronged them, believe them. Not because everyone wronged them, but because they're showing you how they frame conflict. They're showing you that they see themselves as blameless. And if they see themselves as blameless, guess who they're going to blame when things go wrong between you two? That's narrative pre-positioning. And the antidote is simple. Don't take on the project of being the one person who finally understands them. That's not your job. Your job is to protect your own peace. Your job is to notice the pre-shape and choose differently. I want to close with this. Most people think danger announces itself. They think harmful people look dangerous. They think betrayal comes out of nowhere. It doesn't. It builds. It rehearses. It leaks. And if you're paying attention, if you've been trained to see the pre-shape, you'll catch it early. You'll see the boundary test in week 2. You'll hear the victim narrative in month 1. You'll feel the escalation starting, and you'll step back before it peaks. And here's what that gives you. It gives you time. It gives you clarity. It gives you the ability to leave before the damage is done. And that's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. That's survival. That's intelligence. Every act of harm has a pre-shape. You've seen it before. You just didn't know what you were looking at. Now you do. Thank you for watching. If this resonated with you, leave a comment below and let me know which pattern you've seen in your own life. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. There's more of this coming. More patterns. More mechanisms. More things you're not supposed to see. Here's what I want you to take from this. Trust the twinge. That little discomfort you feel when something's off, that's not anxiety. That's data. That's your brain telling you it caught an inconsistency. Don't explain it away. Mark it. Watch for it again. And if it repeats, act. You don't need permission. You don't need proof that would hold up in court. You just need the pattern. And once you've got the pattern, you've got everything you need to protect yourself. See you in the next one.